answers. And what I look for are patterns. What are the characteristics of our experiences? Why do we have them? How do we have them? What do we do with the information? I'm not out to prove the paranormal. It's very slippery. It's like mercury. You try and confine it, it squishes into 10 different directions. It's blurry, it's fluid, and every time you think you've got something definitive about it, you don't. So I'm really more interested in the how and why people have experiences, because clearly throughout human history, people have been having encounters with entities, and the dead, I might imagine, that we assume are ghosts. And the core characteristics of these experiences really haven't changed much over the centuries. We put different labels on them, but we react the same way, we are impacted the same way, and influenced the same way. So what's really behind all of this? Some years ago, I got involved in shadow people. I started getting a lot of inquiries about shadow people. People were sending me their experiences and asking, what's going on here? What are these beings? And so I thought, well, this bears some investigation. I think I'll take a look into it, study a few dozen cases, write a few articles. Well, here I am 5 years later, more than 500 cases into it. This has taken me into some very peculiar territory where shadow people start reaching into almost every area of the paranormal that I've been dealing with professionally now for over 20 years. I've been working full-time in the paranormal since 1983. And somebody mentioned, I think it was Rob maybe a little earlier, about how difficult it is to make a living. I'm probably one of those few people who actually make a living studying the paranormal. And one of the major links that I found between shadow people is a connection to the ET experience. So I'm going to share that with you today with an emphasis on that and some of my ideas of what I think is going on here and why people in ufology need to look more into avenues of the paranormal to look for some very strange connections that can help us explain the whole big picture. We can't focus on a piece of the puzzle. We have to look at what I call broad spectrum phenomena to try and understand what's really happening to us. I believe in parallel dimensions. I think a lot of these beings are really, as John Keel would call them, ultra-terrestrials. We have these nexus points where our dimension intersects with other dimensions, and that's where we have these encounters. So, without further ado, let's get into shadow people. What are they? Well, here you see this figure kind of looming over this fellow. It's actually kind of an old illustration, but it expresses a very modern experience. Shadow people, the core shadow person experience is a very dark, menacing figure who usually visits you in the bedroom. They look like the blacker than black, thoroughly solid silhouettes of males 6 to 7 feet tall, often wearing coats and hats. Very, very strange description, but I think there are reasons for that that we'll get into. Sometimes they appear with no hat, sometimes they look like they're wearing more a cloak and hood.
Hey Mike, isn't that what your girlfriend said about you?
People have the classic nighttime encounter experience. You wake up in the middle of the night, 3 to 4 a.m. is usually the core hour for this, and see these figures either standing by the bed, or they actually see them come into the room, they're standing in the doorway, they come out of the closet, they slide out from under the bed, and they have...
Oh my God, that's exactly like Mike.
Other than this solid silhouette, which will black out everything behind them.
Mike.
So they look very solid, and they emanate this hostility and this, what people describe as ultimate evil, which is why some people think
definitely Mike.
I do not think they are. They're terrifying experiences, and some of these shadow figures just stare at people, and some will act out aggressively toward people with a host of psychological, mental, and physical consequences. When they notice that they are being observed by people, some of them will stay, increasing the terror of the recipient, and some of them will vanish. They vanish by disappearing up through the ceiling, going out windows, dropping down into the floor, sliding back under the bed, very happy thought, or zipping out hallways. They will vanish like smoke, so they seem to be solid, and yet they don't really conform to the physical environment. So that's the core experience, and I found that many shadow people experiencers were also ET experiencers. Some of them had just had contact experiences, some of them had had abduction experiences, and there were links between the two and how they happened. Shadow people are also found in haunted locations. I'm going to show you some pictures of places that are famous for shadow people. And they're also found out in the woodlands. You can find references in folklore to them going way, way back, centuries and centuries. European folklore, Native American folklore about these figures. So whoever they are, they've been around us a long time. My conclusion is they have an agenda. It's probably not very friendly to us. So what is it about them that makes them want to be in our world and come and approach people? What are they getting from us? I'm going to show you some drawings. I do have some photographs of shadow people. I think they are incredibly difficult to photograph. If they don't want to be seen, I don't think they will be seen. But I've acquired a collection of photographs, and I've also taken some from the internet where people have tried to portray what they've encountered. So here's kind of a typical character with this strange-looking hat. The hat most often described, by the way, is like the old Dick Tracy detective hat. That's what people usually see. Descriptions like Abraham Lincoln stovepipes, kind of big Mexican floppy fedoras, something like Victorian-era hats. They really run the gamut, but there is something on the head. And this figure is kind of, draped in a cloak. Here's a frequent experiencer. There are multiple experiencers, just like there are ET experiencers, where shadow people seem to hone in on individuals and their families over and over again. So here's an experiencer. The shadow people walks through the wall at the same place. Cat does this every time. Animals react negatively to these things, and I found that where people describe frequent experiences, where the shadow person always came into their room at the same place, animals do not want to go in that corner. There is something tainted about the energy there. So this thing materializes through the wall and comes up to the bed and menaces the sleeper. Sometimes they just look like blobs. I have a lot of descriptions of shadow people that you never even get a person out of the description, but yet that's what people call them. They have some intuitive sense that it's a shadowy form of something human-like. I don't think that there is anything human to these forms. Now, they usually show up as one, rarely in a group. Sometimes they will show up in twos, but usually when they approach people, it's as a single entity. Here's something that really looks more like what you would think of an astral spirit than a shadow person. And sometimes the edges of them kind of blur out. This one looks rather demonic. There's a suggestion of eyes on this figure. Sometimes when people draw them, they will put eyes on them even if they don't see them, because they have this sense of being stared at very intensely. So there must be eyes on this thing somewhere. If people see eyes, they are usually red. I have one case of white eyes and one case of yellow.
Don't you have an outfit just like that?
Red. This is a female experiencer, an artist. She's done kind of an artist's conception of some of the shadow beings that she says have visited her since childhood. And this one looks particularly threatening as well. Sometimes people see them in motion, where they're kind of moving up and down like they're in a crouch, almost like an animal kind of assessing a victim. Now, in all of the cases that I have collected, and I have a little over 500 in my database, there are 3 words that show up in almost every account: fear, panic, and terror. I felt absolute terror. Fear, terror. These are lines from the letters I get. I jumped up with fright and screamed. Intense dread, petrified to the point of paralyzed. I was freaked out. Fear I can't describe. I was hiding in absolute terror. I was scared witless. I screamed and it went back underneath the bed. I get the worst case of chills ever just talking about it. Now, when people have approached me to share their stories, many of them express a fear that just by talking about it will call that thing back into their lives. Even if they've only had one experience and it happened years ago, they feel it has a